this time for all ages combines two things. It shows a connection between our seventh principle, which, can you remember that? The respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are part, and parachuting cats. And I'm not joking. Can you show me proof, Sebastian, of the parachuting cats? People don't believe me about this. So thank you, Sebastian. So there's the proof of it. So this is a story, and this is a real story that happened in 1950. And it's the island of Borneo. And the island of Borneo, it kind of belongs to three countries. It belongs to, well, it's shared between Malaysia, Indonesia, and, can anyone remember the third one? Pundit? Brunei, thank you. And it's shared between those three islands, but they were having this huge problem with mosquitoes. And I think we all know that the seventh principle does not apply to mosquitoes. Or at least it's very, very low down in the scale of things that have got inherent worth and dignity in mosquitoes. So, you know, the mosquitoes were causing a huge, huge problem. So the World Health Organization, because, you know, not only are they a nuisance, they cause malaria. And it's a huge, to this day, it's a huge killer. It's one of the biggest killers we have in the world. And so the World Health Organization decided they were going to spray DDT in the island of Borneo to eliminate the mosquitoes, which it did. But the DDT didn't discriminate, and it impacted two other animals, or insects, wasps and flies. And it basically wiped out the wasp, and that caused a lot of hardship for the people in Borneo, because wasps would often eat the larvae of snails. And then, so the snail population just, you know, boomed after the wasps were eradicated. But you know what snails like to eat? Grass. And you know what many of the roofs of houses in Borneo were made of? Grass. So the snails would get up there and eat that, and so everyone's roof would end up having huge holes in it. And then it would get this torrential rain, and it would come in, so they were having to patch up that. That was a nuisance, but that wasn't the biggest problem. The biggest problem was DDT would also kill flies. And flies was the main food of geckos. And geckos were the main food of the cats in the island. And so what happened was, with the wiping out of the flies, the geckos, you know, would get poisoned with DDT as well. And the cats would eat it, and all the cats would die. And what happened was they got overflowing with rats. And so the solution they decided was they needed to parachute cats into the island. And I've read anywhere it happened between 20 and 10,000 or 20,000 cats. I don't know what the real number is. You can find both in the internet. Now, I've got this great image of cats parachuting in like that. I suspect they were probably in crates. But the fact is, you know, it seems like such a ridiculous solution, and I think this is an example of us not understanding the interdependent web of all existence. We do one thing to eradicate the problem, and we don't understand the unintended consequences of everything else. And you see that. Who would have thought about the overflow of rats? Who would have thought about, you know, snails causing, holes in the roof of houses, all because we were trying to eliminate mosquitoes. So I think we always need to think about this. When we think of belonging to the earth and respecting the earth, we need to realize we are part of it, and what we do as human beings, we have a disproportionate impact on the earth, and that's what we need to remember as part of the interdependent web of all existence.
Looking into her eyes through the screen of my phone, as she sits on her bed, leaning against the cinder block walls, I see the sadness, the aloneness, the "mommy, come fix this" look on her face. I hear it in the tone of her voice, the crossing of her legs on the bed. It is so hard to be new, to be starting a life, a new school, trying to learn the ways and the customs, seeking friends and familiarity, comfort and hope. And I can't do those hard things for her. She has to do them herself. Watching her struggle is hard. I have to hold myself back from offering advice, from trying to make it better. I feel her pain in my body, her sadness in my heart. She belongs to me, but we are not one person. Up, mama, she used to demand, looking at me with her arms raised high, asking to be carried. When she was little, if she could have crawled back inside my belly, she would have. Not so much these days. In her last year of high school, she did her best to separate from me. She had no time to cuddle. She was off with her friends on adventures in San Francisco, or cloistered with her boyfriend in her room with the door closed. She helped me to let go, to get used to her absence. And now, as she sits alone in her room, staring through the glass of my phone, I want to pick her up and hold her close and make it all better. To go back to the days when I could arrange a play date and buy her an ice cream, and all would be well. I want to tell her it will be all right, and she will find her people, and soon it will feel like home. But now is not the time. All I can do is listen and reach across the country with my love. Sweet girl, I tell her, you can do hard things. And she can. And she will be all right.
So much of what I've been reading over the last few weeks has been talking about the epidemic, not the corona pandemic, but the epidemic of loneliness in the United States. Particularly men, but not only men, particularly teenagers. And Liz talked beautifully about seeing her daughter there on the screen and feeling kind of helpless, but sending the love there. And it's a powerful image. But there is loneliness, and the pandemic has only amplified that loneliness for so many in our community. Or perhaps it's just brought to the fore a problem that was already there and it's just been compounded. And the question I was asking myself while I was reading a lot of these is, what is the opposite of loneliness? What is the opposite of loneliness? Is it crowds? I don't think so. And I'm an extrovert. I like crowds, but I don't think it's the opposite of loneliness. Is it community? Sort of, could be. Connection, definitely. But some people say it's belonging is the opposite of loneliness. Belonging, find a community that you're there with. And that is this month's theme, is belonging for September. And I think it's a good one to start the year, especially as we come back from the pandemic. A lot of us might not feel that the communities, the workplaces, the schools, whatever establishments or whatever communities we have, we maybe don't quite feel we are as connected to that as we have been. And we may need to have this act, and I've invented a word here. It's called re-belonging. I think we maybe need to, renegotiate, re-belong to the communities and find if they still fit. Because we've heard about the Great Resignation. Many people have decided that what they were doing, they have a reset in their life. And some people may be doing that with religious community, both the ones that are present or they might be going out looking for a new community. So I think it's this idea of re-belonging we need to be thinking about. What does it mean to reconnect to those communities? Because I think not only are we changed as individuals due to the pandemic, I think those communities we have been changed as well. I think there's a whole shift in our society that we're dealing with. And I know, There's been many places in my life, and I invite you to reflect, and where have you felt in your life you felt you belonged? You felt totally part of that community. You just felt in sync. And I think that's probably harder to think about than those. The second question is, where have you felt that you didn't belong? Middle school? High school, perhaps? All of the above. Yeah, it was better for me in college, but I know been going to college, being the first generation of my family going to college, one of the first, it was hard because I didn't grow up in a wealthy background. And the first person I met in college was a guy who, he flew planes. He was a student, and that was his hobby, was flying planes. I had never met anyone. I think I'd been in a plane once when I went to college, and so it was really bizarre, just there. And so sometimes you don't quite feel you belong. There's a little bit of an imposter syndrome for some of us in certain workplaces, certain education establishments. And there might be an imposter syndrome around being part of a religious community. Do we really feel deep in our hearts, deep in our souls, deep in our spirits that we are religious people, we are spiritual creatures? Or do we feel I can be part of a Unitarian Universalist congregation because it allows imposters? And yes, we do. We're inclusive. We do, because we are searchers. We don't subscribe to a creed. We don't subscribe to a dogma. We don't subscribe to the idea of a supernatural God. If you choose to believe that, that's fine, but that's not what we subscribe to. Some of us here do have an idea of a supernatural God. Many are atheists. Some don't know. But we're in this path together, and we belong in the questions we ask. And we don't belong in the answers each of us come up with. So it's okay to be an imposter, because I think every search begins with that doubt about what we're self. I think many of us come to religious community because we have this heart-shaped hole in our life that we're trying to fill. And I think religious community, and I think especially a Unitarian Universalist community, can do that. Brene Brown, or as I call her, Saint Brene. A quote from her a lot, I know, but she's so quotable. But she says this: true belonging is believing in yourself so deeply that you can share your most authentic self. It's out in the Wayside Pulpit for some of you who see the Wayside Pulpits just outside here. That's the quote for this month. And it's no coincidence that I'm using it today. But it says, true belonging is believing in yourself so deeply that you can share your most authentic self. And that does seem like a key of belonging. But then she goes on to say, I was so shocked to hear that the opposite of belonging is fitting in. But fitting in is assessing a group of people and changing who you are. But true belonging never asks us to change who we are. It demands we be who we are. I hate to say this, but I think I disagree with patron Saint Brene in this one. I think we do change. I think many of us come to religious community to change. And I think one of the things that we're often looking for, those of us who are coming to grow, those of us who are coming to search, those who are coming to seek greater meaning in our life, are looking for a change. But we want to be authentic who we are. So I don't think being authentic and desiring change are in opposition. I think that's fundamentally who we are as Unitarian Universalists. So I'm sorry, Brene, I love you dearly, I respect you dearly, I've read all your books, but I disagree with you in this one. I think a community, and especially a spiritual religious community, does call us to change. And we heard from Lizzie's reflection when she talked about her daughter did change over the last year to separate from us, and that was healthy, and it probably needed to happen. That doesn't mean it's not painful and hard for each of us. And I think many of us who have children who have grown up, we've seen that separation. We've probably done it ourselves as children. We pushed away our parents, partly because we need to, and that was probably hurtful for us while we did it, not just for the parent. But one of the important things, I think, to truly belong anywhere is we have to feel a sense of self-worth. I I think it's hard, and then if we really value ourselves, if we really think we are deserving of a meaningful, loving, caring community, we have to believe we're deserving of it. We have to have that value. I think so many of us come to religious community because we're struggling with that. And I've said it before from this pulpit, and I'll say it again. Whoever comes in here, you're loved and there's nothing you can do about it. Say it with me, you're loved and there's nothing you can do about it, because that's fundamentally who we are as Unitarian Universalists. We put the love of all humanity at the center of our religion. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And that's how we build up people's self-worth, because life damages us. Relationships damages us. So that's the question to ask yourself. Can you be fully honest and authentic in this religious community? And if any of you are answering no to that, please come and speak to me. I need to know why. And I'm not saying we can change that, but I think we all want to be our authentic selves here, and we should be our authentic selves, and we can be our authentic selves, or else the problems with the community. But there's also, like any right, comes a responsibility. I think true belonging comes with engagement and commitment. I think to really feel part of a community, you need to engage with it and commit yourself to it, to do the things, to get involved in the community. Because I think coming to Sunday worship is good, but getting involved, finding roles in the community that can help build connection, but also contribute to the community, helps each of us feel more belonging. We belong to the community. So I invite those of you who are thinking of getting deeper, come and talk to me. Come to talk to anyone to see how can we become more involved in smaller groups in religious education, attending the Ally program coming up in September 8th and the weekend of 24th, 25th. I got that right? So it's hard doing these things from memory, Gene. But yeah, these things, to really be part of these. These are open to everyone. There's very few things in this community that are not open to everyone. So if you want to feel a greater sense of belonging, get engaged in the community. And as I say, I think we do need to take that commitment engaging further right now, because I think we do need to engage that act of re-belonging to the community. Whether it's a committee that you were in, or you weren't in, or you were in the periphery of, we do need to re-belong and recommit ourselves to that. And the cycle of belonging to a religious community, it's a grief process, because it starts off when you first come across Unitarian Universalist as a community. It's elation. I can't believe the community's like this. I've been a Unitarian Universalist all my life. It's fabulous. And then comes the disappointment and the disillusionment that, they're not quite living up to the values. It's not quite the utopia I thought it was. And yet that happens. I think we've all experienced some disillusionment, either with people or events in a religious community. But then there's that re-engagement. And I think that re-engagement after being disappointed is when we probably find the greatest sense of belonging. Because we do that re-engagement because we desire to belong. We're going to work at it, we're going to commit to it, we're going to engage in it. And I think that's an important part of the process, because we're not perfect. I'm not perfect. We'll make mistakes, we'll say things that are hurtful. But what we do covenant to be with each other is we're willing to be called back into covenant, and we're willing to go through that process of acknowledging our wrongdoing, trying to make amends, and committing to do better. And that's what we do as a community, and that's part of that, dealing with disillusionment, re-engagement, and recommitting to this religious community. But I also hope that UUFRC brings us joy, meaning, comfort, and connection. Because ultimately that's what religious community is. And unless we're getting that, then it's hard to really feel you belong. That's why we have the joys and sorrows most Sundays. Because we connect. People can bring their whole authentic selves, their struggles as well as their joys, and share them. So we want that joy, and then we're continually looking for that deeper meaning in our life. We don't know much about what's happening in life, but one of the things we are doing, we're seeking greater meaning, both in the hardships and the joys of life. And when we're struggling, we want that comfort and that connection. And we do all of those things here, and that is available to each of us if we commit and reach out and ask for it. And I know it's hard to ask for help when you need it, but we encourage to do it through the caring team, through the pastoral care team, through the connections team, or through any of the staff. If you need any support, just ask, and I can promise you it will be there. The Quaker writer Douglas Steere says, the ancient question, who am I, inevitably leads to the deeper one, whose am I? Because there's no identity outside of relationship. You cannot be a person by yourself. To ask, whose am I, is to extend the question far beyond little self-absorbed self and wonder, who needs you? Who loves you? To whom are you accountable? To whom do you answer? Whose life is altered by your choices, with whose life is your own, all bound up inextricably in obvious and invisible ways? And so I've kind of titled this worship service, Whose Are We? Because I think we need to ask that question beyond the individual. Because I know there's always this tension within Unitarian Universalism around individualism versus community and how much we need to sacrifice. And can you put up the slide for me now, Sebastian? This is a slide, I'm not sure how readable it's going to be, but this is our 7 principles. And the important thing is not the details of the 7 principles, because I know every one of you knows them off by heart. But the first principle and the 7th principle, the first principle is the inherent worth and dignity of all people, and most of us can remember that one, and it's a really important one. And the 7th principle is respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are part, which I talked about in the Time for All Ages. And the lodestone at the top of the arch is a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And so you've got the first and 7th principles, the foundations, and the 4th principle is the lodestone. And I love that arch area, and the fact that it's an upside down U, it just makes it all the better, being Unitarian Universalist. But one of the things, if you go from the first principle to the 7th principle, it goes from being very individual to being far more community-minded. The 2nd principle is justice and equity in human relations, and the 6th is the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. So it gets more community-oriented as you go towards the 7th principle. So when I hear that question of whose are we? Whose are we? I think of that, our 7th principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence. But I actually don't think that's enough. I think respect is too passive. It allows us to distance ourselves from the web of all existence. And we have to read that last part. We are part of that. And as Unitarian Universalists and as human beings, it's often said that human beings are the universe becoming conscious of itself. The universe becoming conscious of itself. And as I said in the Words for All Ages, human beings have a disproportionate influence on our planet, both for positively and both negatively. So I think this idea of, the 7th principle of respect is not enough. I think we are responsible for it, and we need to engage and nurture and care for the interdependent web of all existence. Respect is the starting point, it's not the end point of the 7th principle. The 7th principle calls each of us to engage and care for it. And parachuting cats may not be the best example of caring for it, but really trying to understand the consequences of what we do. And there's a joke about the 2 people on the boat. One of them begins drilling holes in the bottom of the boat, and the other's aghast and says, "What are you doing? Stop drilling." And the first one replied, "It's all right, I'm drilling in my side of the boat." And that's essentially it with the planet. We pollute here, who knows where it ends up, and pollution there, who knows where it's going to end up. And we see that with global warming right now. I mean, we're just seeing it everywhere throughout the world. I mean, rivers running dry in Europe. I was in London when it was 100 degrees in July. I've never experienced 100 degrees in Britain the whole time I lived there. And it's just, we're seeing it throughout the world. We're seeing it in this country. I mean, This weekend's kind of warm. No, I think Julia had the right idea being in the beach. But I think we really need to take the interdependent web of all existence seriously and really recognize our part of that. That's who we belong to. If we're looking for belonging, we belong to the interdependent web of all existence, and that calls us to nurture and care and engage with it and commit ourselves to doing so. And we start here. We start in this building. We start with this religious community, because I want this to be a religious home for everyone that visits, whether they've been here for 40 years or when they visit one time. I want them to feel that they belong. And I want everyone who's online, who may never come into this building, who are only going to engage with us online, I want them to feel they belong to this community, are part of this community, can engage and can commit to this community. Yes, we respect the interdependent web of all existence. Yes, we respect one another, and we acknowledge the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And we need to commit ourselves as nurturers and carers of that interdependent web and of one another, because that is who we are, that is whose we are.